It is 4:45 in the morning, and I'm going to Ulleungdo.
전방에 연속으로 과속 방지턱입니다.
Okay, it's 5:45, and I'm on almost a completely empty train here. I'm going to Pohang. From Seoul to Pohang is about 2.5 hours, and then at Pohang, I leave the train station and go to the port, and then take the ferry from Pohang to Ulleungdo. And I think the ferry ride is about 3 hours and 20 minutes, 3.5 hours, something like that. So, pretty long day of travel ahead. Welcome to Ulleungdo, a volcanic island just 120 kilometers east of the Korean peninsula, and yet, for Koreans and foreigners alike, oftentimes a once-in-a-lifetime destination. Currently without an airport, Ulleungdo is reachable only by ferry, and inclement weather or strong winds can cause trips to be delayed or cancelled, an inconvenience which can lead to a later than expected arrival at Ulleungdo, or a postponed return to the mainland, or, if one's fate so ordains it, both. Perhaps the uncertainty of this journey contributes to Ulleungdo's reputation as a so-called mysterious island, but there are certainly many factors at play in the popular description of Ulleungdo as a place of mystery. For example, after I was fortunate enough to flag down the only taxi at Sadong Port, my arrival point on the island, the taxi driver took me directly to Taeha Hyangmok Tourist Monorail. Because I'd asked him to drive me to my hotel, and given him the address for said hotel, I was confused. Did I have to take the monorail to reach my hotel? It seemed unlikely that any place of lodging would only be accessible by monorail, but why else would the taxi driver drop me off in front of it, point at it excitedly, and insist that I take it right at that moment? Our inability to communicate in a common language did very little to help clarify this matter, so I collected my bags and strode up to the ticket booth, where I asked in vain about my hotel, and bought a ticket for the monorail. It's a bold choice on the part of a taxi driver to drop off his passenger at a location other than the one they specified upon getting into the taxi. Bolder still when the passenger is neither local nor competent in the local language. But Ulleungdo is a bold and beautiful, mysterious place, full of surprises, both pleasant and incomprehensible. The monorail dropped me off at a trail which led to a giant squid, a normal-sized lighthouse, and some incredible scenic overlooks, but not to my hotel. This did not surprise me. What did surprise me, though, was that my hotel did not exist anywhere on the island. It took me some time to digest this realization as I stood at the address where my hotel was supposed to be and stared, dumbfounded, at an apartment building. I'd been scammed. After a brief spell of panic and a lengthy, unsuccessful foray around the area for an actual hotel, or a yurt, or an abandoned sleeping bag, I managed to arrange for a taxi to pick me up and take me to a place to stay on a busier part of the island, where I woke the receptionist from a late afternoon nap and successfully booked a room. The next morning, an English-speaking staff member at the hotel, who claimed, semi-jokingly, to be the only English speaker on the island, kindly drove me to Dokdo Port. Up-to-date information about accommodations and how to get around Ulleungdo is hard to find in English, and quite possibly in Korean as well, but its best-known tourist spots are pretty well documented. Of all the sites and activities I'd read about, I was most excited about Haengnam Coastal Walk, which starts at Dodong Port and has been called the best coastal walk in Korea, a bold claim for a peninsular country that boasts other eye-pleasing popular island destinations like Jeju and Namhae. But Ulleungdo is a bold and beautiful, mysterious place, full of surprises. Sorry to repeat myself, but it'll help you remember later. Anyway, I looked forward to and thoroughly enjoyed taking in the sights and sounds along the coast, from the jagged cliffs and natural caves to the calming splash of seawater against the fascinating rock formations for which the island is known. Almost enough to make someone forget they'd been scammed out of hundreds of dollars for a bogus hotel listing on a frequently used travel booking app. Almost. The heat and humidity turned me into a traveling sea of sweat, my clothing stubbornly clinging to my body like sea foam, a state in which I would remain for the remainder of my trip, except for when a too brief cold rain fell during my walk along the coast, and whenever I was able to flag down a cab and situate myself directly in front of the air conditioner. The constant walking and sweating gave me a big appetite, one I'd hoped to satisfy with the local seafood and barbecue dishes I'd read about online. But restaurant after restaurant barred their arms at me when I entered, not so subtly suggesting that I dine at another establishment. Some of the local dishes I wanted to try are meant to be shared by 2 or more people, so I didn't take immediate offense at being denied service. But it was frustrating. When I did find a restaurant that was willing to allow me to pay them money in exchange for food, I was first asked to remove my shoes before entering the floor seating area, then to wash and disinfect my hands, a COVID measure, and then told that, oops, the chef was asleep, and they wouldn't be able to serve me after all. It was around 6 p.m., so this all made plenty of sense to me, because Ulleungdo is full of surprises. On my way out, I saw the chef lying on the floor in a private room of some sort, unconscious, a Korean soap opera playing on a screen propped up on an empty crate. I gave them points for honesty, at least. Returning to an outdoor restaurant I'd passed along the coastal trail, I ordered a squid pancake and a bottle of makgeolli. Despite ubiquitous advertising for it, the island's signature pumpkin makgeolli wasn't available there or anywhere else, which was mind-boggling during my repeated attempts to buy it, though I'd later learn that the brewery had shut down. The sun set behind me as I looked out over the water. A drunken Korean tourist sitting about 20 feet away made eye contact with me, briefly, and shouted, "Cheers!" at me, sending a wave of glances in my direction. And that's when I decided to go back to Seoul a day early. But I still had another full day to spend in Ulleungdo, which I used, first and foremost, to change my departure date, then to visit Bongne Waterfall and Dokdo Museum. Bongne Waterfall is quite a beautiful natural feature and a source of drinking water, with some other nearby sites that make a visit there well worth one's while. Dokdo, said to be the first Korean territory to fall victim to Japanese aggression in 1905, is an island 87.4 kilometers from Ulleungdo and visible from there on a clear day. Although it has recently been home to a small number of Korean residents, like less than a handful, as well as security forces, Korea and Japan continue to argue over its true ownership. Even though it looks like little more than a couple of large rocks, the surrounding waters and resources they contain are financially and strategically important. Korea's determination to have Dokdo universally recognized as South Korean territory is steadfast. Observant tourists will notice pictures of the Korean flag bearing slogans such as "Dokdo belongs to Korea," written in English and displayed around Seoul, for example. I even received a discount on my ticket to Ulleungdo for merely accepting literature about Korea's claims to Dokdo. Not only is Dokdo Museum located in Ulleungdo, tours to the disputed island leave from its ports, making a trip there more than just an interesting getaway for Koreans, but a matter of national pride and a highly emotional experience for some people. It was an emotional experience for me, too, just not for the same reasons. On board the ferry back to the mainland, I couldn't shake the feeling that Ulleungdo, what with its hotel scams, its irregular taxis and transportation, its restaurant gatekeepers and sleeping chefs, just wasn't ready for me, a foreign visitor lacking fluency in the Korean language. But perhaps I wasn't ready for Ulleungdo, and perhaps I never will be. But if I ever have another chance to find out, I suppose I'll take it. Do you know why? Neither do I. So let's just say it's a mystery and leave it at that.